A tense roadside stop exposes more than prejudice. It unravels corruption. Officer Holbrook targets Aloria Banks with arrogance and hate, unaware she carries the badge that polices the police. As bystanders film, his threats ignite a chain of events that pierce the blue wall of silence, forcing hidden crimes into the light. One officer's mistake becomes the spark that shakes the system. If this moment felt intense, prepare yourself, because what comes next is darker, more dangerous, and far more powerful than anything you've seen so far. Subscribe to Black Battles and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest powerful stories. The night air was thick with Mississippi heat, as Aloria Banks steered her black sedan down the nearly empty highway. She was returning home from a long day at the Department of Justice, her thoughts already drifting to the comfort of rest. Suddenly, flashing blue lights cut through her rearview mirror. She hadn't been speeding. No broken signals, no violation at all. Still, she pulled over calmly, hands steady on the wheel. Officer Holbrook approached with a heavy stride, his hand resting too comfortably near his holstered weapon. His eyes held suspicion, but beneath it simmered something darker, bias, license and registration. "Now!" he barked, his tone dripping with hostility. Aloria didn't flinch. Her hands remained visible, her breathing even. She knew these situations often escalated when fear or anger entered the equation. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, her voice calm but firm. Holbrook's jaw tightened. He didn't want calmness. He wanted obedience. Two more officers lingered behind him, their presence making the air heavy with tension. "Out of the car!" Holbrook demanded. The crowd began forming, bystanders pulling out their phones, recording the unfolding scene. The silence in the air was broken only by the sound of her door unlocking. Aloria stepped out, composed, her eyes locked on Holbrook's. The routine stop was no routine at all. Something far larger was beginning, and neither Holbrook nor the watching crowd knew just how dangerous his mistake would prove to be. The humid night wrapped around the scene like a suffocating blanket. Red and blue lights flashed across Aloria's composed face as she stood by her car, surrounded by three armed officers. Holbrook circled her like a predator, his hand never straying far from his weapon. "You think you're better than me dressed like that?" he sneered, his voice carrying enough venom to poison the silence. Aloria remained steady. "I complied with every order. There is no reason for this." Her calmness unsettled him. He wanted fear, not control. Fear gave him power. But the more she refused to bend, the more rattled he became. A murmur rippled through the crowd of bystanders, phones held high, capturing every second. The atmosphere thickened. Every word, every move was being documented. Holbrook stepped closer, his tone rising. "Don't play smart with me. People like you always think the rules don't apply." Aloria's eyes met his, unwavering. "The rules apply to everyone, officer. Including you." His face flushed red. For a moment, his hand twitched near his holster, drawing gasps from the crowd. One wrong move, and the night could turn deadly. But Aloria's presence was unshakable, her voice low but firm, echoing louder than any threat. "You're digging yourself deeper with every second of this." Holbrook didn't know it yet, but the balance of power was beginning to shift. The camera lenses were his silent jury, and the woman before him was far more than the target he imagined. The flashing lights faded into the distance as Aloria was escorted into the precinct, her wrists cuffed tighter than necessary. Holbrook strutted behind her with arrogance, masking the unease growing in his chest. To the outside world, it looked like just another arrest. But to Aloria, it felt like the stage for something far bigger. Inside the interrogation room, the walls hummed with fluorescent light. Holbrook slammed a file onto the table, trying to rattle her. "Who do you think you are?" he barked, his voice echoing through the empty halls. Aloria sat calmly, her hands folded neatly on the table. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't break eye contact. "You've already crossed the line," she said evenly. For a moment, Holbrook faltered. Something about her composure unsettled him more than anger ever could. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You don't scare me. Women like you think you're untouchable." Aloria let the silence stretch, then slowly reached into her purse, which an officer had carelessly tossed onto the table. Her fingers pulled out a sleek leather badge holder. She flipped it open. The golden emblem glinted under the harsh light. Mississippi Department of Justice, Internal Affairs Division. The room fell into a suffocating silence. The junior officer standing near the door stiffened, eyes wide. Holbrook's smirk dissolved into shock. Aloria leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "You've not only humiliated yourself tonight, you violated the very laws you swore to uphold." The precinct buzzed with nervous whispers. News of Aloria's badge had spread faster than wildfire. Some officers avoided her gaze, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Holbrook, however, tried to mask his panic with anger. He stormed out of the interrogation room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Aloria wasted no time. Hours later, seated in her office at the Department of Justice, she began combing through Holbrook's file. On paper, he looked almost spotless, commendations for bravery, years of exemplary service. But Aloria knew how to read between the lines. Patterns emerged, complaints quietly dismissed, witness statements missing. Disciplinary reports sealed without explanation. Her eyes froze on one detail: 3 prior excessive force complaints, all closed under insufficient evidence. The complainants' names had been redacted, yet one file hinted at an internal note, handled by Captain R. Holbrook. Her stomach tightened. The captain wasn't just a colleague, he was Holbrook's uncle. The corruption wasn't individual, it was systemic. Aloria leaned back in her chair, the weight of realization pressing down. This wasn't simply about one officer pulling a gun on her. It was about an entire chain of protection shielding him. The evidence she now held could shatter reputations, careers, even lives. But it also painted a target on her back. She closed the file gently, whispering to herself, "This is bigger than you, Holbrook, and now it's mine to expose." By dawn, the videos of Aloria's traffic stop had already spread across social media. Clips of Holbrook barking orders and gripping his holster replayed on endless loops, sparking outrage far beyond Jackson. Hashtags flooded timelines. Outside the precinct, crowds gathered with signs demanding justice. Inside, tension rippled through the department. Senior officers urged Aloria to let it go, arguing that too much noise would damage public trust. She listened quietly, but their words only fueled her resolve. Protecting reputations had allowed men like Holbrook to thrive unchecked. That evening, as she stepped into the dimly lit parking garage beneath her office, footsteps echoed behind her. She didn't flinch. She knew who it was before he spoke. "You're making a mistake," Holbrook hissed, his voice low but trembling. "You think this ends with me? You're putting a target on your back." Aloria turned, her face illuminated by the harsh glow of a single bulb. "The target was there the moment you pulled that gun. Now it's your turn to feel what accountability looks like." Holbrook's bravado cracked for a fraction of a second, but he forced a smirk. "Careful, Banks, this department protects its own. You'll find yourself alone in this fight." She stepped closer, her eyes unblinking. "Then I'll stand alone. Because unlike you, I don't need a wall of silence to shield me." Her words struck him harder than any weapon. And deep down, Holbrook knew his shield was already breaking. The protests outside the precinct grew louder with each passing day. What had started as a viral video was now a movement, demanding not just Holbrook's removal, but accountability for the entire department. The captain, Holbrook's uncle, issued statements insisting the stop had been procedurally correct. But the public wasn't buying it. Neither was Aloria. She worked tirelessly, digging deeper into internal records. Anonymous tips trickled in, officers too afraid to speak publicly but tired of protecting corruption. One young patrolman handed her a flash drive. On it were body cam clips never filed, showing Holbrook using excessive force in at least 3 separate incidents. Each clip ended abruptly, cut before the full brutality could be seen. Aloria's heart pounded as she pieced the evidence together. Every missing complaint, every altered report pointed to a coordinated cover-up. and the captain's signature appeared on nearly all of them. When she presented the findings to her superiors, the room fell into stunned silence. "This isn't just misconduct," she said firmly. "This is systemic obstruction of justice." The decision was swift. Federal investigators were called in. News broke that night. Jackson police under federal investigation following viral traffic stop. For Holbrook, the walls were closing in. The shield he had hidden behind, his uncle, his department, his badge, was crumbling piece by piece. And the woman he thought would be easy prey was now the very force dismantling his world. The courtroom was silent, heavy with anticipation. Every seat was filled. Reporters, community leaders, activists, and ordinary citizens who had followed every twist of the case. At the center sat Officer Holbrook, his once confident posture now replaced with nervous glances and a clenched jaw. His trial had dragged on for weeks, but this was the moment of truth. Aloria Banks sat in the front row, her face calm but her heart racing. She had seen countless officers stand before inquiries, but this was different. This was the man who had pressed a gun against her head, who had tried to strip her dignity in public, and who had ignited a movement larger than either of them could control. The judge read out the verdict. The jury had found Holbrook guilty of misconduct, abuse of power, and violating constitutional rights. His badge and weapon were stripped permanently. The room erupted, some with relief, some with applause, others with tears. Holbrook's face fell as if the weight of his arrogance had finally crushed him. For the first time, he looked small, powerless. Outside the courthouse, chants echoed through the streets. Protesters held signs demanding deeper reforms. News crews swarmed to capture every reaction. Aloria stepped to the podium, microphones flashing. She didn't speak with anger or triumph, but with the calm strength that had carried her through every step. "This is not just about one man," she said firmly. "This is about accountability. This is about a system that, for too long, has protected those who abuse their authority. Today we took one step forward, but the fight is far from over." Her words cut through the noise like steel. She wasn't speaking for herself anymore. She was speaking for every victim who had been silenced, every family who had been denied justice. That night, alone in her office, Aloria reflected on the journey. She remembered her father's words. "Truth has more power than any weapon. It might not win the first battle, but it will win the last." Those words had carried her through fear, humiliation, and endless resistance. Holbrook would spend years away from the uniform he once abused. But, more importantly, his downfall had sparked an inquiry that was reshaping the Jackson Police Department. Policies were being rewritten, oversight committees strengthened, and new officers trained under stricter codes of conduct. Aloria leaned back in her chair, exhausted but unbroken. She knew the road ahead would be long. Systemic change was never swift, but she also knew that tonight marked a turning point. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a small smile. Holbrook had tried to silence her with fear. Instead, he had amplified her voice, and that voice was now echoing far beyond Mississippi, carrying the promise of truth, justice, and a fight that was only just beginning.